Support comes from Mosby Building Arts, a design-build company committed to remodeling the right way. Visit callmosby.com to get project inspiration for any room of your house.
From the St. Louis Public Radio Newsroom, this is The Gateway. It's Friday, June 7th. I'm Wayne Pratt. Ahead, the St. Louis Blues are closer to their first ever Stanley Cup. We will have details on a big win in Boston. Also, the Mississippi River. It has been above flood stage at St. Louis for more than 80 days. That has many people comparing this year's high water to the highest levels on record.
You live on the river, you can wait it out. And this year, they say, I'm pretty sure it probably will get worse than 93.
But St. Louis Public Radio's Eli Chen reports scientists are not certain this year's flood will surpass the water of 26 years ago. First, the news. Blues fans are celebrating, and that's not just because today's National Donut Day. The St. Louis Blues are now one victory away from winning the team's first ever Stanley Cup. That's after a huge road win last night in Boston.
Meanwhile, it is Perron trying to feed one in front. They score!
That turned out to be the winning goal in a 2-1 victory for the Blues. The audio is from the NHL and NBC. St. Louis leads this best-of-7 matchup 3-2. The series returns to Enterprise Center Sunday night for Game 6, and a chance for the Blues to win the Stanley Cup on home ice. In other news, Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft is rejecting an effort to overturn the state's newly signed abortion ban. St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum reports the Republican is citing the Missouri Constitution for his decision.
Legislation that bans most abortions after 8 weeks includes a provision that goes into effect immediately. The Missouri Constitution prohibits referendums on legislation with so-called emergency clauses, which is why Ashcroft rejected 2 bids to overturn the abortion ban.
There was an appropriate emergency clause on there that met the requirements. I had no choice but to reject those 2 referendums.
The American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri filed a lawsuit Thursday over Ashcroft's decision. Missouri case law says that judges can determine if an emergency clause is valid. The clock is ticking, though. Proponents of a referendum have until August 28th to gather roughly 100,000 signatures. I'm Jason Rosenbaum, St. Louis Public Radio.
The state-appointed board that has run St. Louis public schools for more than a decade is ready to give up control. The Special Administrative Board held its last business meeting last night alongside the elected board members who are set to take control next month. Resident and district watcher Bob Miller is praising what the special board has done to turn the district around since the 2007 state takeover of SLPS.
This change over 10 or 12 years has been not evolutionary. That's too slow. It's been revolutionary.
As one of its final acts, the state-appointed board approved next year's school budget. The panel will hold a celebratory final meeting June 27th. The Mississippi River has been above flood stage at St. Louis and many other areas since early spring. That has residents, scientists, and government officials comparing this year's high water to the Great Flood of 1993. St. Louis Public Radio's Eli Chen reports.
Andrea McManus evacuated from her home in Grafton, Illinois on March 22nd.
The water came in the next day. We recessed for 4 days, and we went in to get the stuff out.
McManus has been trying to find a new place for her and her 3 kids to live. Since May 9th, she's been unable to enter her apartment.
You live on the river, you can wait it out. And this year, they say, I'm pretty sure it probably will get worse than 93.
The Mississippi River has been above flood stage for many communities since early spring. Dave Bussey is the chief engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers St. Louis District. He says the length of the flood will beat the record set by the Great Flood of 1993, which was 104 days.
If you remember 93, we started with a flood early around Easter, went below flood stage, and then we started up again. This flood will be consecutively more days on those levees.
River levels have already beat the second highest flood on record in St. Louis, 43.2 feet in 1973. But the Mississippi is still just a few feet shy of the 49.5-foot record set in 1993. Washington University geologist Bob Criss says there's still plenty of time this summer for flood levels to rise even higher. In 1993, the river crested in St. Louis in August.
Whether that's the crest for the year, boy, I'm not so sure. We could still have a very severe flood.
And Jonathan Remo, a geographer at Southern Illinois University Carbondale, says it's possible that the record could be broken this year, but only if there's enough rain.
If we get a lot more rain in the right locations over the next couple days to weeks, we could exceed 1993, but right now the forecast isn't calling for that.
There's some key differences between the two floods. 26 years ago, there were more people living in the floodplain. The Federal Emergency Management Agency bought more than 4,000 residential properties in Missouri after '93. And Dave Bussey at the Corps says the levees that protect communities in St. Louis are stronger now, thanks to $100 million worth of improvements that have been made since the Great Flood.
I would be extremely concerned if we had the levees we had in '93 now.
But there's more to worry about now than in 1993. Criss and other geologists published several studies that show that levees and other man-made structures can constrict rivers and worsen floods. And there's more research on climate change driving major floods. As floods in the St. Louis region become more intense and frequent, some environmentalists say it's time to rethink how the river is managed. David Stokes is the executive director of the Great Rivers Habitat Alliance.
This is the new normal. I mean, how many times can we have a 100-year flood either on the Mississippi or the Merrimack or the Missouri in the greater St. Louis region every year before we realize that those terms are essentially useless? And what we've done has so changed the river systems that we need to basically throw out all prior measurements.
At the Gateway Arch, several people came this week to see the rising floodwaters, like Valley Park resident Cindy Dursey.
In '93, I can remember the water came up the arch steps even higher. It was just even more massive. Yeah. Really incredible. Just the force of nature.
It's not quite as bad as '93, but it's close. Whether this flood beats the record really just depends on the rain. I'm Eli Chen, St. Louis Public Radio.
Our David Casares edited that report. Shula Newman is the executive editor of St. Louis Public Radio. Music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Wayne Pratt, and from the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, this has been The Gateway.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.